Hello, everyone. My name is David Bland, and I'm the publisher of Social Selling News. I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled The FTC Warning Letter, What You Should Know. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and the link will be posted for you in the coming days. And all viewers will remain on mute for the duration of the webinar, but we will welcome your questions using the chat feature. So feel free to type and submit those questions for our two guests today in the chat box, and we will save some time at the end of the webinar to answer a few of those questions. Now it is my sincere pleasure to introduce my two guests today, who will share their extensive knowledge in two areas of critical importance to direct sellers, legal and compliance, especially in the light of the FTC shifting strategies over the past year, as evidenced by this warning letter. I'd like to first welcome John Villafranco, a partner at Kelley, Drye & Warren. John is considered an authority on advertising and consumer protection law and has represented clients in FTC as well as state attorneys general investigations. John's clients include tech providers, telecommunication and cloud-based software companies, major retailers, and direct sellers. I'm also very happy to welcome Jonathan Gilliam, founder and CEO of Momentum Factor, the leading provider of online compliance monitoring software, reputation management, and unauthorized seller enforcement for direct selling companies. Jonathan is a well-known thought leader on the important subject of field and regulatory compliance and is an important voice for the channel in these days of tightening regulations and increased scrutiny. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Increased scrutiny indeed. So let me set the table here. You can tell I've got Thanksgiving already on the brain. Last month, the Federal Trade Commission sent over 1,800 letters called Notices of Penalty Offense to 3 groups of businesses. These notices represent the first step for the FTC when acting on its penalty offense authority, a power that was granted to the Commission in 1975. The first letter was sent to 70 for-profit colleges, putting them on notice regarding claims about their graduates' career and earnings prospects. The second letter went to 700 companies, including some very large corporations. They were put on notice regarding deceptive endorsement practices, fake product reviews, and testimonials. And then just days later, the third letter, and the topic of today's discussion, was sent to over 1,100 businesses that offer money-making opportunities, including hundreds of direct sellers, to put them on notice for deceptive earnings claims. But that's not all. These 1,100 companies were also put on notice about deceptive endorsements and testimonials, basically tacking on the offenses listed in the FTC's letter number 2. So my first question today is for John. Simply, why this and why now?
Okay, and I'm assuming that by John you mean me.
Yeah, I'll refer to you as John, and Jonathan will be our number 2.
Great. And let me first say that I'm really pleased to be here, and we've got a really great group that is in attendance today. If you guys have questions, I'm sure you'll have questions. Put them in the chat. We'll try to get to them throughout and at the end of the program. So great question. Why this? Why now? This really all stems from the FTC's loss in AMG Capital Management. And I think most people on the call probably know all about it. I won't get into detail, but other than to say the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 back in April that the FTC does not have authority under Section 13B to recover money. And so since that point in time, the FTC has been searching for all available pressure points in order to, and all avenues to money. And so, we've seen it with AG involvement. They filed the lawsuit against Frontier in California, and were joined by 6 attorneys general in states where they could pursue money damages. We've seen it with reliance on statutes like ROSCA, which provide for civil penalties. We've even seen withdrawal of cases in Fleet Corps in federal court in the 11th Circuit, and the refiling in an administrative proceeding in order to pursue redress under Section 19. So, they threaten to pursue every possible remedy use all the arrows in their quiver, and that's exactly what they're doing. So here with the Penalty Offense Authority, they are seeking civil penalties based upon Section 5M1B of the FTC Act, and they're dusting off an authority that they haven't used for a very long time. I will say that we were on notice. The current Bureau Director, Sam Levine, and former Commissioner Chopra put a paper out back in October of 2020 saying that they believe that the Penalty Offense Authority was a viable tool for the FTC in the event that they were to lose AMG, or even if they didn't lose AMG. They believe that by putting companies on notice of order violations, that those companies would then be in a position where they would have to comply, and if they didn't comply and the case was litigated, then the FTC could pursue civil penalties of up to $44,000 per violation.
And a quick follow-up, John. These prior orders, some of which date back to the 1940s, that this authority is relying on, how do they apply to today's marketing practices?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a question that I don't think will be answered conclusively until a company is forced to litigate with the FTC. I would say the prior orders are relevant in the most general way, and that might not be enough for the FTC to establish a close enough connection to obtain civil penalties. I mean, if you dig into these prior orders, some of them, I think that the earliest one dates back to like 1941, right? Mm-hmm. Those notices address what I would consider to be highly unique factual situations that are inherently different from modern direct selling, such as, I think some of those orders touched on occupational courses, more akin to for-profit colleges, franchisees, mushroom growing, I think was even one of the subjects in the order, and weaving. And in at least 6 of those cases, the final order, in my view, it actually contradicts the applicable legal standards by prohibiting all earnings claims. And that's just not what the law is today. And 6 of those orders basically said that, you can't make any earnings claims. And I think it's going to be hard for the FTC, I think, to tie current practices to the factual findings and conclusions that were the result of those litigated administrative orders.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one of them was even encyclopedia sales. So that takes me back.
Weaving, I love that one.
Yeah,
a lot of weavers out there making claims.
So Jonathan, civil penalties carry. I mean, despite maybe this weakness of the current use of the POA, but these civil penalties do carry significant financial risk for a company, especially in the age of social media posts, because of the way the FTC defines a violation. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so essentially what the FTC is saying is that they're going to charge up to $44,000 per violation per occurrence, right? The practical side of that is few companies could withstand an attack at the level that they theorize they could do and win, especially if they had no recourse. Now, that's not the case, and I'll let John talk more about what recourse is later, but there is no, this is a pretty scary thing. I'm sure those who got the letter read, you're now on notice and you could be fined up to this amount per occurrence. That's pretty scary. Whether or not that could actually happen is yet to be known. But the idea that these illegal claims are made per distributor and per day is pretty daunting. That adds up a lot if it really becomes a true punishment and fines must be paid. That will add up a lot for any company, especially new ones, especially startups who couldn't afford to be paying these kinds of fines when they're trying to grow. So a lot of what they're doing also is they're kind of eager to punish and deter and not just restore ill-gotten gains, but this is sort of a punishment approach versus previous efforts, I think, that we've seen where it's, the pyramid scheme litigations and such, and the 13B type of things that they had had put together in the past. I think these days it's this new way of coming at us. It's more direct, less fuzzy than those cases were, and again, remains to be seen how it turns out.
And
Now, let
John,
me just add one thing there, Jonathan. I think to some extent, it's the difference between civil penalties in this context and redress is a distinction without a difference, right? I mean, it's from the FTC staff's perspective, I would say, they really do. They believe that they're promoting good practices and forcing companies to follow the law, and they like the idea of giving money back to injured consumers. So they much prefer the redress model. Civil penalties, as you correctly point out, it's punitive, it's penalties, and those penalties are paid directly to the U.S. Treasury. But when it comes to negotiating with the FTC, if a company finds themselves in that position, I guess it'll just really come down to a negotiation over a lot of money, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it feels more like a direct money grab than it does an institutional, protect the consumer kind of thing. Would you say that's right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
because these penalties, if retrieved by the FTC, would go back to the Treasury as opposed to victims, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
does that change their argument much, John, in your opinion?
What do you mean by that?
Well, if they're not there to make the case that they're protecting the consumer, in this case, it's filling the coffers of the government. Isn't that a more difficult, in some ways, argument to make? And or maybe in this idea of civil penalties, it's not. Maybe that is the way that goes. But I'm just wondering, when they're trying to, this commission in particular is very has expressed a lot of desire to protect the consumer, and in this case, are they really doing that?
And John,
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I think it does make a bit of a difference, but I think in the end, what they would probably say is it's instilling discipline in the marketplace, right? I mean, companies are going to, or should really be paying very, very close attention to their compliance operations, because either they're going to be paying redress to consumers in the form of hundreds of thousands, more likely millions or 10 millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, or they're going to be paying it directly to the Treasury. Either way, the company's paying, right? And so that should create a disincentive, or I should say an incentive to comply with the law.
Yeah, it's money either way for the company.
Right.
Yeah.
And John, one thing that jumped out at me when I was reading the letter, independent distributors were specifically mentioned. And I imagine, that was done for a reason. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it has a lot to do with the model, right? And I think we all would agree that it's an easier case for the FTC to proceed against a company that is making a statement that is false or otherwise deceptive than it is against independent salespeople. But I think, as we all know, I mean, the FTC, when they move against companies, they cite statements that they believe are false, that are made by independent salespeople, and what they do is they want to show. I mean, it's essentially a theory of third-party liability, where they want to show that the company has they failed to effectively monitor and oversee their distributors and their agents. And I think that it explains why it's so important to have effective training, monitoring, and enforcement programs in place, because the FTC will argue in a situation where they're moving against a company and highlighting claims made by independent salespeople that the company has facilitated or provided substantial assistance to another's unfair or deceptive act. And these cases just reinforce the importance, in my mind, of implementing and enforcing effective monitoring and compliance programs to identify and deter non-compliant member actions in the field.
Gotcha. And Jonathan, with this compliance in the context of the internet, and we know it's a vast place, it seems like new marketing and social media platforms are popping up each week. What can legal and compliance departments do to find these claims across such a wide expanse that may be hidden from view?
That is a question that we answer a lot. The internet, I've said for a long time, is a giant place to police. It takes a lot of people, processes, technology to do that. Obviously, and I think most of the people on this call will know, you have to keep a clean house, right? You have to proactively find those posts and messages that are against your policies and against the law. And so, I think those who are interested in this webinar probably know that, and they just want to know how they can do it and the best ways they can do it. And obviously technology plays a huge part in that. And I will say that as a technology compliance platform company. But even if you're doing it manually, it's just really important to have systems and processes in place that if you ever get a knock on the door, you can say, we are doing the best things that we can. We are doing the training, we are doing the monitoring, we're doing the enforcement. We are pulling distributorships from people who, even if they're at rank, who say things they shouldn't say. So just making sure that you're doing the things that are expected of you as a business in this channel per regulators is really, really important. So you just have to keep doing it and be proactive about it. You can't wait for it to come in, wait for someone to tell on someone, this person is doing this thing and letting the company know. You have to actually go find it.
And one thing I've heard you say before, Jonathan, is the internet is forever.
Yeah.
How far back should a company go when searching for problematic social media posts?
I think there's a practical answer to that and a legal answer to that. I'll answer the practical side of that. The practical side is, in our practice, we believe every post matters and we need to go after everything and pull them down. When a regulator goes online to find an errant post, what do? They go to Google and they'll type in the name of the company or the product or the brand, and then type in a disease name perhaps, or an income claim name. FTC case, it might be something around bonuses or earning or commission or money or millionaire. So they'll do the same thing that anybody else would do. They don't really care if it's 3 years old, 5 years old. And so our position is you got to find everything. Certainly you can prioritize what you look for, but you've got to find it all if you can, and just don't stop. John, you may have another legal insight into that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And this is always a big issue, non-compliant claims that were posted months or even years ago, but still might exist in social media. And I would say that, these older posts present less risk, but only because FTC staff are less likely maybe to find them. But as long as they can be accessed, they're actionable. And I can tell you that, that's the kind of, when a regulator drafts a complaint and they put together their complaint, they're looking for the most egregious examples, and they will include stuff. And this has been the case. It's been borne out in many, many instances. They'll include claims that were made that are stale, or that might involve even distributors who don't even aren't affiliated with the company anymore. They'll do that to create color and to create some leverage in negotiations. So clearly, it's important to clean up whatever is out there and online, and do your best to make sure that even the older claims, or if they're not compliant, that they come down.
Gotcha. Yeah. John, I have a two-part question for you. Okay, so the channel's now been put on notice. What would the FTC's next action be, if and when they find a company that they believe has committed one of these alleged offenses that are listed in the letter? In short, what happens next?
Yeah, I think in many ways it's same as it ever was, right? If they would, if it's egregious activity like we've seen in certain instances, they could seek extraordinary relief, a TRO, or and move in that regard and try to shut a company down right out of the gates. The focus, of course, would be on the Section 5 violation, that the activity was unfair or otherwise deceptive. Otherwise, they could send the company a CID, or they could send them a letter request that they cooperate voluntarily in lieu of compulsory process, and then start an investigation under Part 2 of their rules of practice. That could lead to a draft complaint, an order, and possible negotiations or litigation. And the big difference now is that after AMG was decided, and until really they made this move on the penalty offense authority, they didn't really, a party could sit on the other side of the table from them, and when the discussion turned to money, say, well, you don't have any authority to get any money here. The Supreme Court has ruled, and you can't get any money from us on this. So that would obviously change the dynamic across the negotiating table. Now, what they can say is that we are entitled to, because we've put the industry on notice and sent out this letter and have this 5M1B authority, we are entitled to civil penalties. And we believe on a per violation basis, your company would have to pay, X millions of dollars. So it really does change the entire dynamic as you're going through an investigation. But they still would have to bring their case, and they would have to allege a Section 5 violation. Got it.
And if a company were to go to you and say, we are now officially being targeted, they're moving on us, what would your general strategies be for defense of a company?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that we're in a Part 2 investigation. I mean, obviously, if they are at your door and trying to shut you down, immediately there would be a different tact. But if they were to proceed with a CID, which is what they typically do, and they requested information, my suggestion would be cooperate. You need to work with staff, and you need to give them all the information that they ask for. While at the same time, you need to tell your story. You need to explain, why it is that you have not violated the law. And a very big part of that story is explaining, why it is that you've got effective compliance procedures in place. You would want to explain in excruciating detail how you go about training, not only employees at the company, but your distributor base, how you are actively monitoring that distributor base, and how you are enforcing your rules when violations occur. And when I say that, enforcing your rules, I mean it up and down, the chain, so that even your longest and your highest income distributors are subject to the same rules as individuals who just got started on the business opportunity.
And speaking of business opportunity, it's a good segue for a really good question that just came in from a viewer. How will this effort by the FTC be included in the new business opportunity rule?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think the two of them are obviously related, but they're also separate. I look at it kind of like a belt and suspenders situation where, we don't know yet. We've heard from Commissioner Chopra back in June that he believed that the business opportunity rule should be extended to multi-level marketers. Currently does not apply to MLMs. And so we don't know exactly what it's going to say. We have long suspected that it's going to focus on income claims, which obviously was the subject of the notices that went out. So because it's MAGMOS rulemaking, and I see that this question came in from Kerry, who knows this very well. Because it's MAGMOS rulemaking, there's going to be notice. There's going to be an opportunity to comment. It's an extended process that even with the new rules that have been put in place, is likely to take a couple of years before it's complete. So one big difference is they could move right now pursuant to their penalty offense authority. They can't do that with a revision of the business opportunity rule and won't be able to do that for a while. If they do get that rule revised, I would expect that they'll rely on that rule because it's a more direct and probably a stronger means of getting at civil penalties than than if they were to pursue the same result using their penalty offense authority, which I believe is really based on a suspect reading of the statute.
Great advice. Jonathan, stepping aside from the legal arguments and the positioning, what is the practical effect of all this? What does this mean for the short and long term for the channel at large?
I think what I said earlier about just having to keep our house clean and our house in order is still very important, even more important now. Now those individual posts out there don't just mean a nasty gram, and then maybe it's brought into some other suit later. Now it's like that could mean $43,000, $44,000. So I think we need to keep doing what we're doing. If we're not doing enough, we need to do more as far as income claims. And training is really, really important. So everything that we've been told to do by the FTC, and they've said as much, what we need to do, we need to keep doing. That's short term, all of us in the channel. Longer term, I mean, you look at the business opportunity rule, you look at the other initiatives that the FTC has taken, they're unearthing all of these old rules and tactics and techniques and weapons. They aren't not sitting tight on the 13B ruling. They're looking for those things to come after the channel. So there's going to be a continued tightening up. I was telling John earlier that the POA letters came out on my birthday, right? And some people said, "Happy birthday! You're in the regulation space and all that." And I said, a little regulation is good, for our business and actually for the channel as well. But too much regulation is not good for anyone. And what I'm seeing is a lot of attempts at too much regulation, whether or not, according to John and other people who know where the FTC is headed on this, whether that'll happen, we don't know. But certainly the tightening up is continuing. There is a burgeoning in the mainstream press and social media that we've all noticed that is pushing this kind of narrative that the channel can be up to no good, and that we're not doing what we need to do to protect it. So, or protect people, protect consumers. So I think it's going to continue to tighten up.
Gotcha. John, as I mentioned earlier, the letter received by direct sellers also included notice of the endorsement and testimonial related offenses. What should companies understand about this type of regulatory landmine?
That was a pretty slick move, wasn't it? It just by
like an afterthought.
Yeah, I mean, they by reference they incorporated the letter that was sent to numerous companies, just a week before. And let me say that was fast company. When you look at the companies that received those letters, I mean, this was every single major company that has consumer products or services in the country. Verizon, Unilever, Clorox, T-Mobile. I mean, the biggest names, they all received that notice, and they were just like the direct selling industry and others were put on notice with this notice, POA notice. All of the industry was told that, look, if you engage in fake reviews, if you have endorsers who are making unsubstantiated claims, if you're failing to disclose material connections, and importantly, I think for direct sellers, if you're misrepresenting either explicitly or implicitly that the experience of an endorser represents the typical or ordinary experience of users of the product or others in the chain, then you're violating the law, and we can move against you for civil penalties. So it's really important as companies are looking at their compliance functions, that they're not only looking at how their distributors and how the company is making income claims, but also looking at how endorsements and testimonials are being used in social media and in other media.
I think this demonstrates the challenge that this industry has versus other industries. You can go to a major brand and say, stop making these claims, or making sure your influencers add the hashtag ad to their posts. But for us, we've got 100,000 people out there that are championing our product, And again, our challenge is much bigger on the enforcement and the monitoring piece side of this thing. So yeah, I think even, you know, throwing the testimonials on the end of that for any other company might be, oh, okay, yeah, we won't do that anymore. But for us, it's like, oh my gosh, every one of our direct sellers is an influencer, right? So it's just more grist for the mill, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at maybe a few other questions from our viewers here. I think we've got some good ones. If those older posts are from a distributor who is gone and we cannot, you know, get that person to remove the post, and the social media platform will not honor the request, you know, legally, what can we do to protect ourselves as a company from FTC accountability?
Jonathan, you want to field that from your perspective?
You know, every day in our client programs, there are cases where there's a post that can't come down. YouTube's especially bad about this. YouTube can stay out there forever. Literally, if you ever put a YouTube out on your own, just know that if you die, it's there. It's never going away. So and we have many incidents of people passing away or just disappearing or just not being engaged anymore, where we have to get those down. We work real hard with the social media platforms to do that. There are facilities within the social media platforms to connect connect with their customer support. As you know, it doesn't always work that way, work out well. But yeah, that is a major issue. I guess the legal question would be, what happens next? How can we show we protect ourselves? I know there are ways you can document. Like in our case, we will document. We reached out. There's a whole list of accountability and actions in each profile and record in our compliance platform that will do that. But I'm wondering if, you know, if that's something that comes up in negotiation, ultimately in litigation, John, that, you know, hey, we worked on that guy for 3 years trying to get it taken down. We did the best we could. Hands up.
That's the answer right there. I mean, that's what you want to be able to, you know, you want to document it. You want to be able to show that you've done everything you could. And there's just only so much you can do.
And that really is underlying all this. You need to do the best you can. And I think the ones who really get in trouble, and we've seen it in cases where companies have come to us afterwards, is they shirk it off. They go, it doesn't really apply to us. We'll see if somebody near us gets taken down and then we'll get serious about it. Or maybe the company's run by someone who really doesn't understand compliance and what the risk really is. And they tend to kind of blow it off internally. And so there's no culture of compliance there to really watch out for the stuff. Those are the guys who get the letters, DSSRC letters, FTC letters, and then maybe penalties for under this POA authority.
Another great question coming in. Does this POA campaign further signal an FTC move away from the pyramid actions to focus on the possibly more easy to prove claims violations through civil penalties?
I mean, it's a great question, Larry. I think clearly they understand that an income claim is an easier case for them to bring. A pyramid case is an exceedingly difficult case to prove, also difficult to defend, obviously. But, you know, I don't want to give the impression that that means that companies should not be worried about their comp plan and should not be worried about, you know, their recruiting practices and that sort of thing, because as you know, and I think most people here know, I mean, it's one thing to have to deal with a claim, an income claim that is deceptive or, you know, potentially false, but it's a whole different ball of wax if you've got, you know, the FTC alleging that you're operating a pyramid scheme. I mean, that is an existential threat to the company. So yes, it's easier for them to deal with income claims. Does that mean we're never going to see them bring another pyramid case again? I'd say no. I think we probably will.
Gotcha. Here's one for you, Jonathan. What are your thoughts on teaching a company's reps to report improper income claims they see for the compliance department of that company?
You know, a lot of our clients struggle with that. We call that the tattletale, tattletaling method of sourcing online violations. In our platform, we have a facility to make that really easy and get it around the customer support team and keep people from calling executives and telling on people. One of the issues I have with that method, I suppose, is that a company doesn't want to build a culture of telling on each other. I've seen companies out there going, okay, now report on everybody you know and everything you see. We want to know all about the compliance. They think that's good compliance training. But actually, it creates this sort of culture of like any negativity in the field, obviously, we all know is not something you want. Rather, I think it's a good idea to create a mechanism for people to honestly and fairly say, I found something I think could be a threat to the business. And having accountability to them. It's not anonymous, right? You want people to say, it was, to add their name to a complaint so that it's, you can come back to it and it doesn't create this kind of gossipy wheel that happens sometimes in the field. So I think gingerly encouraging that is a good idea because the field is out there and they see everything. But pushing too hard, I think, could be detrimental to the growth of the field.
Thanks for that question, Jay. Good question. Next for John. It's not showing me who from. There it is, Robert. How important is it to show an income disclosure statement on the company website and when? Startup companies don't want to show IDSs when there's no history.
I mean, I think an income disclosure statement is an important part of the story. I mean, look, most companies are going to want to promote and advertise atypical results that deviate in an acceptable way from what is generally expected. And so being able to establish that baseline of what is generally expected is really, really important. And so I think that, an effective income statement, regardless of the stage of the company where you're at is really critical. And it's critical for a number of reasons. Of course, it's an important way to educate the field and to let them know what they can reasonably expect. And it's an important thing to be able to show a regulator if you are required to do so at some point in time, that you're not hiding from what the generally expected result is. It's right there on your website. It's clear as day. It's communicated in a way that's not adhesive and difficult to understand. And it's right there. So, I know that there might be some difference of opinion on this, but I believe that a clear and conspicuous income statement that truthfully puts out what can be generally expected is a really important part of the compliance package.
And the FTC has said as much, right? They've said IDSs are very, very important. The DSSRC is saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
A question from DL. Jonathan, do you want to take this one? Aside from utilizing monitoring programs, highlighting compliance topics and claims during conventions and throughout various regionals, what recommendations do you have on educating the distributor base?
Good question. So the regulators have told us that training is a critical part of this process to show people that, how to do it right and what not to say and all those things. Obviously, doing that within your compliance practice is important. So if someone violates your rule, maybe they should get a video explaining what an income claim is. Maybe they should take a quiz. Other things to show that they're learning. And you want to show as a company, we're teaching people. This is what they're learning. There are real results from this. I think there's a lot of things people can do, companies can do. They can certainly train from the stage. They can train the trainers as far as their leaders. I think there's plenty in the field communications space where I can put out, hey, this month's compliance corner in the company newsletter that goes out every month. And any communications you have, there should be an element of compliance. Hey, we're all protecting our business here. You can make it fun. You can gamify it. There's lots of ways to do it. It doesn't have to be a hammer all the time. Education is really the key to all this, because if that one distributor who comes on new gets a little dose of compliance education, they may never make a claim. And the compound effect of that on the field, I think, is tremendous. And so training being on the front end of it and being in the sort of enforcement side of it, which is you did this, you should learn this, is really important. And training by rank. I know some companies that will train the entire top 3 ranks every quarter with some new video that they'll send out just to ensure that the folks at the top who are training downward do have that education.
Absolutely. Well, thanks to the viewers. Those are great questions. Really appreciate that. And, before we wrap up today, Maybe just a takeaway, a final takeaway from 30,000 feet. John, your thoughts as we move forward now kind of in the era of the penalty offense authority.
Yeah, I guess two things I wanted to say. One is this move by the FTC, it will be challenged, all right? And there are defenses that are available to companies. And I think it's just important to know that, right? And how that will turn out, who knows? But, you know, what they're doing, I mean, we talked a little bit about how using the penalty offense authority to seek civil penalties against companies, using, you know, orders that are decades old, that's inconsistent, in my opinion, with congressional intent. You know, the idea that they're going to use these orders, which are not very specific and really don't really apply to, you know, what's going on today. I think that that's suspect. Rulemaking would clearly be the better result or the better route for them. And, you know, I also believe that there's a strong constitutional argument here, you know, that companies' due process rights are being violated when you're using a litigated order from an administrative proceeding decades old. So this is an aggressive move by them. It's an attempt to push their authority. And it's just, I just wanted to emphasize that just because they say that they have this authority, it's really, it may not be. And the other thing I wanted to mention is just, you know, lots happening in Congress right now. I think most people on this call have been following the whole 13B issue now for some time. And you know that there's a bill in the House right now that would give the FTC authority under 13B. There's been some Republican pushback on the Senate Commerce Committee. And, you know, I wonder, you know, exactly what those Republicans are thinking right now and whether they're thinking, well, why is a 13B fix even necessary given, you know, this muscular like play by the FTC, you know, and given that the FTC is finding all these other ways to pursue monetary remedies, maybe we don't need a 13B fix. So it's interesting to watch, you know, what's happening in Congress, and I'll be very interested to see what happens, you know, by year end and into the next year in Congress.
Jonathan, final thoughts from you?
You know, I think that was a great explanation, John. It's really good to get a high level on this because we get so in the weeds and we get the letters and we don't know what to do. To know kind of where it stands, I think John's right. This will be litigated. It will be contested. But there will be instances where a company can't defend themselves, right? They can't do anything about it. They have to pay a fee. And I'm wondering if the strategy of the FTC just to get money because they no longer have this 13B weapon, that their idea is we just go pick companies apart and at least make money that way, and then show, you know, get some headlines and show some strength or flex some muscles. And so I think that's one aspect. The other is, you know, think of the difference between this and FTC storming your office, guns blazing, and shutting your company down. That's been effectively, temporarily maybe, but effectively eliminated for a while, maybe. That's under 13B at least, to come in and say, you know what, no due process, you guys are shut down, we're taking your business, we're firing your employees, we're taking your data. That is a big relief. So I think remembering where we come from 5-6 years ago is really important as well, but staying really vigilant. This isn't getting any easier, it's not getting any better, and the folks in our consumer protection agencies are smart, and they are looking for ways to further protect the consumer and give themselves their reason for existence. So we just have to keep doing what we're doing, do the right thing always. The intent should always be good, to protect our enrollees, protect our customers, and make sure everybody is doing what they should do.
Excellent. Well, again, I want to thank John Villafranco and Jonathan Gilliam for taking part in this important discussion. Really great information. And thank you to all the viewers for joining us today. I know we're moving into the hectic time of year, so we sure appreciate your taking time out to join us. And I'll say, as a final note, a reminder, if any direct selling executives or suppliers would like a complimentary subscription to Social Selling News, just get a hold of me. My email address is david@socialsellingnews.com. So that concludes our webinar today. From everyone at Social Selling News, I want to thank each and every one of you and wish you and your families a happy and safe Thanksgiving.
David, did you want to mention the Direct Selling Legal and Compliance Conference that you're sponsoring, that we're hosting? Did you get that plug in there, man? February 16th. February 16th.
February 16th is the day in Austin, Texas. And where's the sign up for that, Jonathan?
You can go, you guys are sponsoring, I think it's on the Social Selling News website headline. I think it's there. Yeah.
Okay.
Or our site as well, momofactor.com or momofactor.com.
Momofactor.com,
right.
socialsellingnews.com.
There you go.
Very good. Again, thanks, guys. And
right. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Great job. Thank you.
Hey, John.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.